All right, welcome back, everyone, to What's on Our Screens. I'm Ryan, as always, and today I have with me Caspian, as also usual, and we have a guest with us, Wes, today to talk about The Last of Us. Thank you guys.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for being here. So we'll be talking about the first 5 episodes today. So just like, I guess, spoiler warning for those.
Oh, I haven't seen the 5th one.
Oh, okay. It's the first 4. We're talking about the first 4 then.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, I've only seen the first 3, but it's fine to spoil it. I came in knowing that, and I can maybe be a perspective of ignorance to like ask questions around it.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. Well, where do you want to start?
I know I just talked about like maybe asking, before diving into the show, what our first exposure to like The Last of Us was, and like if you guys played the game.
Caspian, you've played the game, right?
So no, I think I mentioned this when we were talking about it. I just watched someone play it.
Oh
like,
yeah.
I feel like the majority of like when I've asked this question to other people, they're like, yeah, I watched someone on YouTube play it, and I just think that's because the game came out when like the peak of like playthrough and just YouTube gaming was going on. But I want to say I never had a PlayStation, but I do, along with like watching it online, I do think I remember having a friend and like sitting and watching him play it, and then like maybe he gave me the remote every now and then. But yeah, what about you guys?
Same here. More of an Xbox guy myself. Same with like most of my friends. So never had any exposure to the game other than like I remember it coming out, and I remember it being, like widely praised, and I'm excited to play it. The first part is like coming to PC at the end of the month, so I think I'm probably just going to buy it on there and play it on PC because I don't want to shell out the money for a PlayStation. So yeah, but I've never played the game, never watched any of the like playthroughs like you were talking about. So this is just like completely fresh, just going in on the TV show, other than like there's some sort of zombie apocalypse and there's a guy and he's going through with, I had always assumed his daughter until like when I started watching the show, and I was like, oh, it's not his daughter.
Yeah, so. I think, and maybe the like Telltale Walking Dead series kind of meshed that together, even though it's not his daughter in that series too, but there's just a relationship kind of bond.
The like reluctant like guardian and young girl protecting like a young girl who isn't his daughter kind of trope. Like it's in Logan too. Like it's kind of all over the place recently.
Yeah, for sure.
What about you, Wes?
Yeah, so I've never been too much of a gamer, and so like I knew about the game just because like people talked about it, but like it was never on my radar. I never watched anybody play through it or anything, so I don't know any of everything that happens. Like I have not seen any of it, but my roommate is really into it. He has a PS4, and so he's played both games, and he's been a big fan of them for years. And I remember hearing conversations about this show being developed maybe around like 2014, 2015.
So something that I found out about recently, or like I kind of remember it, but not like really, is Sam Raimi was originally attached. He was one of the people who was attached to direct this.
Really?
When it was like a movie project before it came to HBO.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would have been definitely probably a different take than what it is right now.
Would have been a very different take.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, man, Sam Raimi. That would have been. I think. Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah,
I'm satisfied with how it worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I heard sort of rumblings around that, and it kind of seemed like one of those projects that like was just never going to happen. Like it just kept on getting shipped around to a bunch of different studios, and no one was really able to find a director, find some stars, things like that. And I remember a couple years ago, kind of right as Pedro Pascal was like reaching like peak Hollywood mainstream, like maybe around like Wonder Woman 1984, whenever he like had been this guy who had been famous for a while, but he was like reaching that next level of fame, was when I first heard about him being attached to this. And when the trailer first came out, the thing that really stood out to me was how colorful it was. and like it really seemed like it was leaning away from that really strong trend in the 2010s of like having dystopian stories that are all gray and black and white and stuff. And I was just really excited to see a story that seemed like, you know, being trusting it as like one of HBO's next big projects. They always like really invest a lot of time and energy and creative care into like putting together a show of this scale. And so no one was affiliated with them. I was like, I think I'm optimistic, and just seeing how colorful the trailer was, along with just like, you know, beautiful lighting and things like that, and so many of the shots. That was kind of the thing, like maybe like, oh wait, like I'm really excited for this. And I kind of deliberately, knowing like I could have played the game because my roommate has a copy and he would be down for me to. I've like been going back and forth about, do I want to play it, or I think like actually deliberately holding back and you know, seeing it each week as it comes out. Because I have been watching it week by week, and I really enjoyed that as like someone who grew up on like never watching TV and only ever saw things on like Netflix, where like you don't see things week by week. I really enjoyed it, and so I think I might have to hold off on the game and just stick with the series.
I love this week to week model. I feel like a lot of people that I talk to are like, I'm just kind of waiting until like all of them come out, and then I'll just binge them. And I'm like, I really do enjoy like sitting down every week and being like, awesome, get another 50 minutes of this, and then I gotta wait another week.
Yeah,
like I like the
it's
piece
great
by piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I did have something to say. Like you were kind of like when I watched it, you know, this past week, like how colorful it is has definitely stood out. And I was wondering, I mean, this is kind of getting into plot points, but do you think that is, you know, just them trying to do something different, or do you think that is correlated to kind of their understanding of like what started the virus, because that's already correlated to nature? So is it like nature's just taking hold of like the world? Like that's why it kind of looks pretty.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just was curious if you guys think there's like a relation there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a sense of that. If y'all know Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, it's an early Studio Ghibli movie. It was, I think it was the first manga that Hayao Miyazaki ever wrote, but that is also a post-apocalyptic world where fungus has taken over everything. Yeah. And one of the things that is a really central theme in that story is like just how beautiful the fungus is, and the idea of humans sort of and Nausicaa is really powerful as a protagonist, that she like is willing to name the beauty of the fungus even though it's a threat to her species, but the idea that like it has its own value in life and things like that. So it's really interesting to hear you bring that up, because I feel like you're kind of thinking about it in some of that similar direction of like the cordyceps is this, you know, it's this threat to humanity, but there are many ways in which it has like reclaimed a lot of, you know, natural beauty into this society, into this world, and seeing everything covered in plants like is a really it's a real cliche within dystopian stories, but I think something that goes undersaid in that is like plants growing over things isn't them sort of falling into disrepair. Like there's a sense in which plants growing over things because humans have left them alone is actually like a new life springing up, and there's a real beauty to that. That's not an angle I thought about with this series at all, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. And like, I mean, we can kind of get into the first kind of scene that we see, like the kind of talk show. The doctor or whatever, the specialist, like even talks about the dynamic between like fungi gives us like penicillin, something healthy, but then can also, you know, take advantage of us, I guess, and like control us. So I just thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the Nausicaa connection. I just watched that like last year for the first time. Yeah, it's kind of the same kind of thing as what's happening here. Yeah, that first opening scene I thought was, if you're cool with us just like diving into
let's go for it.
Of all of it.
Take me along with you guys.
I think that opening scene is like a really perfect like play setter, rather than like trying to explain like how this outbreak happened and like going into like this big, like they kind of go back to it at the beginning of episode 2 with like some like biologist in Jakarta. Yeah. But I like I'm going to explain to you the theory behind what could happen, and then we're just going to jump to like the worst case scenario of like it happened. And I think post COVID, it was like terrifying to watch. Of like,
I felt that a lot. I was like, this sounds really familiar.
Yeah, one guy is like, the next like pandemic could be like really, really terrifying. And then the other guy's like, no, what's even more scary is if there's some sort of fungal infection that allows, the fungus to like take over human hosts. And it's like, oh, maybe we got the better one. If, not to downplay how bad COVID was, but like in comparison to like what we see here, it's like, man, things could have been a whole lot worse. you know? That was just like a really scary and like good tone setting, especially like in the time that we're watching the show. I just found that really interesting and really compelling.
Yeah, I think that's a good correlation because, like, I'm sure they are trying to kind of divert the focus a little bit away from like the pandemic, and are like, this is different though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that really stood out to me about that scene, it was really brown. They were wearing brown suits. It was a brown background, and it's interesting to think like this is one of the only scenes we see where it's before there's any sort of deconstruction of society due to this fungus and stuff. And if we think about this recurring idea of color, like the fact that like the most stable in some ways, like socially stable scene we ever get is one that's like years and years before the pandemic hits, even though we do get a couple really good scenes like right before it hits. Is the least colorful, and then we've spoken about the beauty of all these fungus and things like that, and just seeing some behind the scenes stuff, like the level of detail in the makeup and the level of scientific research and the way that a lot of fungus sort of develop and bloom, and the way that's been incorporated into the bodies of these clickers and things like that. There's just so much beauty and color to it in that way, and that in some ways makes it more horrific. But I'm jumping ahead when I get back to the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, you guys are gonna have to kind of help me along too. It's been a little bit since I watched the first couple episodes.
Yeah.
So then we cut to them.
We don't like. If you,
sorry.
No, you're good. I was just saying, like, I feel like we can just jump. Like, I don't know if we have to go like plot.
Oh yeah,
point
we can
by
jump
plot
around,
point.
definitely.
Like, don't feel like we have to like tell it all. I had a question. I just mentioned to Ryan that I'm a little confused regarding like the specific like spread of the like the virus or whatever they call it in the show. I think it's in episode 2 where they kind of talk about how there's like some, I think it's Ellie that talks about like some explode and like their spores go in the air and they can infect people that way. But I was just like, if it's everywhere, could we not just breathe it in at any point?
I thought she was joking when she said that.
Okay.
Was she?
I don't remember that scene.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe that was a rumor she heard, and then Joel was like, "That's not true."
Okay, maybe I'm misremembering, but I was just like, if it's spores that are like getting in people, I feel like they could just be floating around Earth at any.
It also
point.
seemed like at the start, or in the second episode when they were talking to the woman in Jakarta, it sounded like it was like a food production plant that got infected.
Like yeast. Yeah. Because yeast is a fungus.
Okay, you're right.
Like
they
you're
did
saying,
go into
that
that.
gets better.
So then it would be in all the food. So I feel like people would be very cautious of what they're choosing to eat. But you don't see any of that.
And we don't got to break down the continuity. But I was confused because like spores can literally just be in the air at any point. So I was just like, I feel like everyone would be wearing masks, but then maybe that's too close to.
I do like that it feels a lot more original than like any of the other. Like it doesn't feel like I'm watching The Walking Dead for like the 4th time.
Yeah.
Which, do they ever give a reason for how it started in The Walking Dead?
I've never seen it.
I didn't get deep enough in.
I've watched a decent amount, but I feel like I don't ever remember there being like a reason.
I feel like there's like a litmus test of like, when did you stop watching The Walking Dead? Because I feel like a lot of people watched it and then everyone was like, oh yeah, I stopped watching after like season whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I don't know anyone. I at least haven't met anyone who's like watched it all the way through.
Yeah.
Isn't there a scene maybe it's in episode 3 where they conduct experiments on like humans versus dogs and their responsiveness to the virus, and it's like Oh no, wait! I'm thinking of I Am Legend,
Yeah.
which I also just watched for the first time last
Oh, yeah.
week.
What's funny
Yeah.
though is when you're talking about how green it was, I Am
Yeah.
Legend actually pop up because like we see a lot of the overgrownness like
Yeah.
in like Times Square
Uh-huh.
and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, that's
Sorry,
so
dude.
funny. Literally, like my, like I'm just realizing now, like I had never seen I Am Legend before, and I watched like the first half of it this week, and like I think multiple things I've said have actually been memories from watching that and not this show.
Oh, you're all good.
But yeah,
Not to get too far off topic, but
Uh-huh.
do you think that the I Am Legend like monsters, are they vampires or zombies?
I don't. I only saw the first half, but let's see.
They're like crazy fast, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're really
because
fast, but they
in, like-
can't see sunlight.
Yeah, so like in
Mm.
any description that you read of the movie, they're like they call them like vampires. And then whenever people talk about the movie, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's a zombie movie." And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's not.
Mhm.
Interesting.
I don't know. Just a little thing that I wanted to ask about.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's kind of a credit to Neil Druckmann, the creator of the game.
Who also was really heavily consulting on the development of the show too.
He's
yeah.
credited
Mhm.
on like every episode, and it seems like he was heavily involved. No, it's just a credit to him to like think outside the box and like figure out a way to do zombies differently.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it feel a lot more original and not like copy and paste of a lot of the other like zombie content that I feel like there's been a lot of over the past like 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
Especially with The Walking Dead's popularity.
Mhm. Yeah, even after just the first episode, like I was already saying, like this is my favorite piece of zombie media I've ever seen. Like, it accesses a sense of originality. Not that like all those other zombie medias don't have their own validity in ways, but this one it stands out. Yeah.
Did we want to try and go back to the first episode if there's anything like significant we wanted to
I
mention?
don't know. Is there anything?
I guess, do you guys think it was like set up like fast, slow, just right?
I loved the first episode.
Yeah, I think all of it's like incredibly well paced. I think there's like some parts that are a little bit slow,
Yeah.
but the slow parts are like made up for by everything else.
Yeah, and I think we may have talked about this a little bit yesterday, but like really establishing like the atmosphere, because I think when we normally think of like an apocalypse like movie, we think about like anyone can do whatever they want, and not like you're kind of confined in this society, and there's like still a hierarchy like very much present, which I think was like really interesting and like not something I feel like we see a lot in kind of that genre. So I thought that was really interesting, like really establishing that.
Yeah, the world building is really, really impressive. All of the like quarantine zones, and then it seems like, some of them, they're like the same like organization that's supposed to be like running them, but it seems like they're all run differently and they're all run by different It's like true like states run themselves, and some of them are like run well, like the one, or better, like the one that we meet where Pedro Pascal and all of them are from, and then the one in Kansas City, which seems like it was just like tyrannical. Just all this like little things about how this like epidemic like played out over the last like, I think is it a 10 or a 20-year jump?
20.
20. Yeah, just like all the little things of like how this has played out for the last 20 years. It's just like really well executed.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that there have been a lot of the comments around it kind of moving just really slowly, and a lot of people who complain like the first episode was really just like dry, or things like taking so much time, spending so much time with Sarah, Joel's daughter from before the pandemic hits, and really focusing on her much more so than Joel throughout that, only to have her, spoiler alert, die around I think halfway through the episode. That was like it was a really bold creative choice that I think we've seen emulated in later episodes too, with the way that the show's really willing to move away from its quote unquote central characters and just give time towards expressing something else about the world. But I just found that the detail with which their relationship as father and daughter was built, and also just seeing the way like they had the relationship with the neighbors, and they were sort of like in the suburbs but also in the downtown. Like there was so much detail put into like the context of exactly what their relationship was and what their life was like, that even though it would took a really long time to build towards any sort of like action, I was completely satisfied. I was really wrapped into, I have no idea where this story is going at all. I didn't know that it was going to like, I was like, oh, the pin is probably going to hit at some point, but I had no idea any of it was going to happen. But I was just like, I just want to see these characters' stories build. And putting these characters first is something that I think this show's done a lot of. Like, even in later episodes, there's really long extended periods. There's no guns. There's no fighting. Like, it's just conversations. But it always feels like it's really just, like, specifically developing their stories and their identities in relationship to one another in a way that just makes for a really compelling total product as a show.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, even the stuff, like, the biggest thing that people are talking about is, like, the third episode and the, like, almost bottle episode with Nick Offerman and I forget who the other
Murray Bartlett is
yes.
his name. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. Their, like, whole story plays out, and we just sit and watch them, you know, kind of live a whole life together. And then at the end, it's, like, not, you know, like, trivialized, but, like, why, you know, you're not, like, sitting there like, why did I just spend, you know, like, 90 minutes watching all this?
Mm-hmm.
And instead, the show, like, ties it all back in, and it's, like, the themes and, like, the story of what you just watched is going to push the emotions of your main characters forward.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, like, I don't think I've ever seen another show just, like, do that. Just,
Yeah.
like, spend a ton of time on characters who aren't, you know, really involved in the main plot of the show at all, but have their story tie into what's happening with our main character. Is just, like, really masterful storytelling, and it's just something new that I hadn't seen that I really, really appreciated with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my first thought of when they, like, literally grew old, like, in, like, the zombie apocalypse, I was like, that's a big W right there. Like, homie, they were just living just a nice little life.
Yeah.
Also, like, I don't know if we want to jump to that episode yet, but I remember just watching the first few minutes when we're introduced to Nick Offerman's character, and I was like, oh, he's just playing Ron Swanson again. And then I was like, actually, you know, he's a little bit nicer and softer.
Yeah.
But I just him, like, alone surviving, being, like, a survivalist and, like, making like a nice, like, meat dish and just eating it alone. I was like, this is the same character.
Yeah. No, this is exactly how Ron Swanson would go about living in an apocalypse.
Yeah.
Which is wild, yeah.
So I just thought that was funny.
I was
Yeah.
kind of curious, where's he getting all this, like, fresh meat from?
He was farming it. He had animals inside of his quarantine zone.
I didn't catch that he had, like, animals there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it just showed him butchering, but
Yeah. I just was like, my man still has, like, fresh meat 20 years into this thing.
Mhm.
Like, there's no way his freezer is working, like, that good.
Yeah.
I had talked with Ryan a little bit, and I do feel like I could have. Ryan had a funny take, but I was just talking about, like, how as soon as he found Frank, it's
Mhm.
Bill and Frank,
Yeah.
and Ron. I almost said Ron Swanson. Nick Offerman is Bill.
Yeah.
Okay. When Bill first found Frank, and, like, he kind of takes him in, lets him shower, gives him clothes, feeds him, you know, we get a resentment from Bill. Like, obviously, like, we later found out that, like, you know, he has feelings for men, and, like, this is kind of his first time, and so that's why he's kind of being a little bit more awkward, because it's like,
Yeah.
it's new for him. But I did feel like we could have used, like a little bit more, like, banter, or, like, just, like, joking around between them, because I feel like their relationship was, like, really cold, and then they, like, played the piano and then just smooched, and, like, it was history.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I feel like we could have, like, at least had a little bit more, like, character development there. But
Mhm.
I don't know. Did you guys
Yeah.
feel
I
that
see
way at
you.
all?
It was like, I mean, it was crazy ambitious to try and like when you think about just like movies that are specifically focused on like, or building a romance between two characters, like, I don't know how many of them like really like span time in this way. Like, there are a lot that like have it all focus on like one 6 month period, and maybe they cut to the end like in the last 5 minutes, and it's like, but this like, so pacing the development of their relationship would have been really hard. But I totally see what you're getting at. So Murray Bartlett, he is Australian, and I did hear his amazing actor. You know, I'm not trying to nitpick him, but I did hear a little bit of that coming through sometimes. And there was a minute where I thought he wasn't even trying to be American. But yeah, so shout out to Australians.
He could, you know, I feel like there's always a good argument for like just let people act in their natural like accent.
Yeah,
because like half the time it doesn't matter. Yeah, like here, like it doesn't really matter. Like maybe it would. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's not consequential to the story that he be not speaking in his native accent. Yeah, and it's just like you're just gonna get a better performance that way too. Sometimes I don't know. Just like another like nitpicky thing that I just like. Yeah. Why don't we just like let these people speak the way they normally speak? It's going to be better if we just do that.
Yeah, I see you for sure.
But to Caspian's like little nitpick, I don't know. I mean, it's like already like an hour and 20-minute episode. So I was like, I don't know. But I mean, at that point, what's another 5 minutes to like, I don't know. Yeah. Make it a little bit more fleshed out. I guess there's like a bunch of stuff that they cut. And there's like a longer cut of this like episode that's like almost 2 hours or something like that. That's just more scenes with them. So I'm sure that if they had something that was like better. Yeah. But this is just like the cut down version.
And to be fair, like by the end of the episode, I'm still like, they're so cute. Yeah. Like they still like built their relationship really well, and I still was like really engaged with it. But yeah, I just more had that like kind of moment like right when they kissed. I was like, whoa, like, but yeah, maybe that just was me.
Not to tear attention away from Bill and Frank, but maybe my favorite moment of this whole episode, maybe just because we've spent more time with Joel, and so he's just like still the one that we identify with in a lot of ways, or at least that maybe I do as an audience member. But the moment where in episode 1, when Joel's trying to like kind of put the fear of God in Ellie of having her be like, if you keep messing around, I'll just leave you out here with the clickers, sort of. He says to her like, me and Tess, we're not good people. Like we've done terrible things. Don't trust. Like he's kind of like almost like don't trust us or don't like rely on us, sort of. And in this episode, he says to Bill, me and Tess, we're good people. We're just trying to get by. And, like, it's just so simple, but, like, the fact that, like, we see his character development sort of in reverse because this is a flashback. And, like, we get that context for, like, how his mind has just become more sort of, like, jaded and just numb to just all the horrors that this sort of apocalyptic environment pushes him towards. I just thought that was just like a really, really smart, like such a simple, but just a really, really smart script moment. So yeah.
I didn't notice that. So I really like that you said that, because that is really interesting. And like, obviously if you're living in that world, stuff probably just progressively gets harder and harder. And so, you know, I mean, we can probably all assume that Tess and Joel ended up like having to, you know, either sacrifice things or people, making them feel like not good people anymore.
Yeah, when Joel is telling, I think this is in episode 4 at the beginning. Spoiler alert, sorry, Caspian.
No, you're good. When
Joel is telling Ellie about how he ended up meeting Tess and spending time with Tommy right at the beginning of the pandemic, he says some stuff about how like, and it's so interesting how it uses the different sort of like him reflecting and also the flashbacks and stuff to like, it constructs the story of Joel's development into this like hardened, emotionally cold character in such a non-linear way that I think is so beautifully expressed. He says something along the lines of like, we had a good thing going with him and Tess and Tommy and this group that they had, and he's talking about like right after the fungus first hit, and then sometime I think in maybe episode 2 he basically says almost the opposite of that of another thing along the lines like, me and Tess aren't good people. He's like, we've killed people that we cared about, like things like that. I know he didn't say that exact thing, but so yeah, we're just like dropping these just little hints in here and there. And episode 4 really invests a lot of time in this in a really incredible way. Episode 4 might be my favorite. It's really simple, but it's really powerful. of just like this very simple character arc that Joel has of being like this guy who's just this like really caring father who wants to help people but isn't necessarily, you know, sure what to do, to just like this really cold guy. And then right as he starts to meet Ellie, that's him sort of developing a willingness to care for other people again for the first time. And it's so simple, but it's done with just so much detail and subtlety that I just think I think it's one of the highlights of the show is his characterization in that way.
Yeah, I was going back to, I think in episode 1 when we first get introduced to like the society in 2023, and it shows like a child being taken in and then tested, and then he was like positive. So then it cuts to like Joel helping like burn the bodies and stuff, and like there was a lady that was like, I can't do it, like I can't throw him in the fire, and he was like, he just went and did it kind of like very nonchalantly. So like,
yeah,
we definitely probably not being around a kid or having that relationship kind of like denormalizes it a little bit.
Yeah, and being in that just like space for 20 years of just like do whatever you got to do to survive, especially at the start of it, just like losing like the thing that's important to you, like his daughter, and then just like having like I have to take care of my brother just becomes the new like objective in his, you know, mind. And then when that, you know, doesn't happen anymore, there's like nothing for him to do other than like, I got to get out to wherever, Montana or Wyoming, to go like find him.
Yeah, that's so far away. It's far from Boston.
Yeah. I was a little concerned because I was at the end of like the middle of episode 4, because I was like, they made it from, where did they start? Like Boston?
To Kansas City.
To Kansas City, and I'm like, you guys are like halfway there. Like this is gonna be pretty quick. And then obviously, like at the start of episode 4, they get like stopped pretty quickly, and I was like, okay, we're slowing down, because I was like, at this rate, we're gonna be like in Wyoming by like the end of the next episode. But
I feel like for Ellie's character, there's just kind of like something small, but like she or like the writing does a good job of like, I feel like there's specifically like a scene I think in episode 1 when they're like having to like walk through water. I can't remember, it was like the museum, I think. And she just was like cursing a bunch, but it was like the kind of cursing that you can tell that it's like when like a 14-year-old like first starts to curse. So I just was like, I thought that like did a really good job of like
all of the like little characterizations from her, like the like she just keeps trying to get a gun until she finally gets one, and like looking, she's like, there's a whole wall of them, and just like little
that was
like
a great scene. There's like 200 guns in the room, and she's like, just give me one. He's like, no.
All of those like little moments from her like really bring in like a humanity and like a lightness to the show that otherwise it's like something that, you know, that could just play really, really dark and depressing. But like I think what Wes was talking about at the beginning with the colors and like with Ellie's character, it brings like a lightheartedness and like a hopefulness to all of it.
I really like the car scene too, when she was like, this is like a spaceship. Like
yeah.
Going back to the whole car battery thing, I guess I was just like, when they were on that journey, or like all in like, I think it's mostly episode 2 when they're finally like trying to take her to the, I'm forgetting the like group name, but they're like post
Fireflies.
Yeah. Whatever. But I was like, I feel like I'd be like looking at car batteries on the way. Like they're just so fixated on
they
like,
deteriorate over time.
Okay.
Is the problem. So none of the like batteries that are in the cars that are just like sitting on the road would actually work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense. And I guess maybe we're meant to understand like pillagers have already come through and taken all of them, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I didn't think about that at all, though.
I just kept being like every time they pass a car, I'm like, just at least look, you know.
So, pop the hood.
Yeah, they kind of explain that they like deteriorate over
Okay.
time, and they like need like a good one
Okay.
for it to actually like start up the car.
Yeah.
And that's why when they got to like Bill and Frank's place, the battery actually worked because he was like making them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he took it apart and put it in the freezer, and that's the only reason why it didn't deteriorate, which I thought was a really interesting detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had everything in mind.
Hey, man.
They should have just stayed there.
Yeah.
I know he's looking for his brother and all, but
Yeah, they could. I like in the note that he leaves, it's like it's addressed to to whoever finds this, but probably Joel.
Yeah.
And then in the note, he's like, I'm assuming it's Joel that's reading this. Otherwise, he would have like been shot by one of my
electrocuted.
booby
Yeah.
traps.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah. It gets like a ha 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 ha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Is there anything like?
Yeah. Man, we just kind of started jumping around.
Oh yeah.
But we got a good conversation going.
I don't know. Is there anything from episode? Is there anything you're like looking forward to in it? I know that's kind of a closing question, but it doesn't have to be. I was just kind of thinking ahead of like where do you see it going at this point?
I think so. You've seen it through episode 3.
Yeah.
I've seen through episode 4. And
I've
Ryan,
seen
you've
through
seen through 5. So if you want to start off, I think
Okay.
we can get each of our perspectives about where we're at and what sort of we're anticipating next.
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
And Ryan, you said like what we want or what we expect.
A little bit of both. I mean, like more like where do you see it going from where you're at?
Well, so I've left off just where they take both Bill and Frank's truck, and so they're on the road to, I guess, Wyoming, because that's where his brother is. I feel like that's just going to be a few episodes of them traveling. I'm sure, I guess I would just assume that there's not good people hanging out in the world, so they're probably going to try and interfere. It's more just what I assume. I don't know what I want. I feel like I'm just enjoying it, so I feel like if having any like expectation could kind of alter how I'm watching it, I guess.
Yeah.
One of the, I think it's in maybe like right at the end of episode 1 or at the beginning of episode 2, one thing that Joel says that really stuck out to me is he says something along the lines of like the slavers and the raiders that are out on the wastelands are like they're a more serious threat than the clickers to him.
Well, and that's like
Yeah.
most post-apocalyptic kind of
Yeah.
stories is like the people are scarier than the zombies are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like that is like a familiar thing, but I am glad it's taking it in that direction because for a show that feels like it has like these writers have like a genuine desire to like write a lot of these characters three-dimensionally, and I know like the sort of antagonistic looking character who gets introduced in episode 4, it seems like we're going to see a lot more angles of her and sort of get a more clear sense of why she has sort of her anger and her vengeance and things going on. But just seeing episode 4 sort of hints at the idea of like a big conflict between sort of like this raider like clan thing and a bunch of zombies, or maybe even another sort of supernatural force. A big conflict's about to come up, and just seeing the developing dynamics between the role that the clickers play in these societies, like seeing the QZ as being a zone that's like really like they're very free. Like there's like they have almost no risk at all of encountering clickers inside of there, and so it's just developed in this just totalitarian regime that just uses the prospect of expulsion as a tool of control. And then we see like in episode 4, it's more of like somewhat of like an anarchy type scenario. And then we've seen sort of these empty wastelands with random sort of stray clickers walking around and things like that. So we have all these different scenarios of like all the ways that these situations can develop within this world, all of which do feel very authentic to 20 years into this type of thing. And I'm really interested to see like the idea of a growing conflict between the raiders and a massive group of clickers, the intersection between the different groups of sort of threats, we might call them quote unquote, to Joel and Ellie if they're, our main protagonists that we're seeking to see succeed. That's something I'm really interested to see because we really haven't seen, like the only conflict with clickers we've seen, I think, is like the ones that Joel and Ellie and Tess fought in that one museum. And so the sort of wider scale conflicts between these groups and developing into that as the story just sort of expands in scope as we see more of this world. I feel like the showrunners have given me more than enough faith to trust that they're going to be able to handle that in like a nuanced way that feels like it's going to stay true to the voice of the show that we've seen so far. And so I'm really looking forward to where it goes.
Yeah. I'll try. I guess I accidentally kind of spoiled stuff for you.
You're good. You're good. Yeah.
But I'll try my best to like not. It seems like there's going to be a lot more of like they're going to be traveling, but there's going to be obstacles in their path, whether that's like, you were talking about, Wes, what those threats are going to be, whether that's more of the clickers or that's, outside forces, is like going to change maybe from week to week or like bi-weekly to bi-weekly, I guess. But it just got renewed for a second season, so it seems like there needs to be a lot more stuff that needs to play out. I imagine they're just going to pull from the game. So with how like well-renowned the game is, I feel like, and like you said, how they've handled stuff so far, it seems like it feels comfortable to have total faith in the creators, which is, kind of a non-answer to my own question, but just to say that like what we've gotten so far is probably not even the best of what's to come. So
yeah, so I have seen the full trailer for season 1, and there's some really distinct moments. There's a couple like characters that we haven't seen yet, as far as I can tell, that I'm really interested to see sort of enter the picture. And so, yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, the trailer was playing when I had the page up on IMDb, and there was some stuff that I was like, whoop, that hasn't happened yet. I kind of don't want to know.
Yeah.
But I was noticing some scenes that happen in snow, and I'm kind of excited about that. I like the way that like snow looks when we like film it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Are you just saying it in general?
I like snow. But it's like...
It's pretty.
Yeah, no, it makes for some pretty shots, and I feel like it's underused in like horror storytelling, and there's like some really great contrasts of like stuff is usually... Like horror stuff is usually very dark when it's shot, but like, I mean, to bring it back to what Wes was talking about at the beginning about how colorful this is like snow makes everything very bright, and it's just not something that you're used to seeing when you're watching something that's supposed to be like scary.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that even just speaks to, again, just the originality of this show of like, it does use darkness, to express fear and, and mystery and things like that, but it doesn't really like lean on it in a way where like many of the scenes we've seen so far with clickers and with conflict have been just in bright daylight and stuff, and so it's relying on really detailed setups and things like that, and not just like there could be something out there, which like can be an effective storytelling tool, but it's a really simple one. And just to see just how willing they are to even like bring the clickers just into broad daylight. It also just shows how confident they are in the visuals that they've prepared, and just that confidence is infectious to an audience and like helps us just trust in the validity of the creator's vision even more.
I kind of had like another kind of closing thought of just like, I feel like notoriously when like games get adapted into film, they're notoriously like kind of bad. But I was just curious, like, one, if like you think this is gonna open the door for like more things to get adapted. And, like I know there was like Uncharted and like more recent things, and also like the Mario movie, like it does, and Sonic, I guess. It feels like there is like some drive to like try and adapt these things, but I feel like stuff like the Resident Evil series is like always just kind of flopped, and like the Rock Doom like also is just kind of a meme. So I was curious on like if you guys think that this is something that's going to start working more because of this series, or if like this is kind of like the best version of adapting the game, or if there's like other examples of them.
I kind of have 2 points to it. First is like this game, as far as I understand it, is something that's more narrative
Yeah, for
than
sure.
it is like gameplay.
Yeah.
And like one of the biggest problems with games, adapting games into movies, is like the exciting thing about most of the games is the gameplay.
Yeah.
And like how fun it is to like play it.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily the story that's in it, but
Yeah.
you know, there are some times where the story is like really outstanding, and that's when adaptation can be really good, and that's, I think, why it's working so well here. But as like tangential to that, I think that also at least these like creatives who are starting to make more adaptations of games are finally starting to figure out, you know, how to make these things work in the form of a movie rather than a game. I think Sonic is probably a better example. I haven't seen Sonic, but I've heard that people tend to like it. I really enjoyed the new Mortal Kombat movie. I thought it was just like a lot of fun. So
Have you seen The Witcher?
I haven't seen The Witcher.
Okay. I feel like that's a pretty well liked, and like I feel like very much gameplay based game. Like there's a story to it, but
See, the caveat with that one is that it's based on a book series.
okay.
So like, you know, there's like good examples, but it's usually when there's like a good story base behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, I don't know, it feels like maybe we're starting to figure out ways to pull a story out of it.
Yeah.
And like, we're getting out of the zone of like, it's intellectual property, it's just going to make money. And
Yeah.
we're actually going to have to like put some work into it in order to have it be good. I think we're finally starting to figure that out, thankfully.
Do you think that's been like a gradual thing, or do you think The Last of Us has really pushed that?
I mean, it hasn't like been out for too long, so it's hard
Yeah.
to say whether
Okay.
it's like doing anything for it. We'll see. I guess I was just looking at Craig Mazin's other upcoming projects, and he wrote the screenplay for Eli Roth's Borderlands movie that's now in post-production. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
Craig Mazin, the showrunner for The Last of Us.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. So I mean, like maybe
Yeah.
he's going to be our like go-to guy of like adapting video games.
Interesting.
But
Yeah.
I don't know, Wes, do you have any?
I've been
thoughts?
and I think part of this comes from just not being a gamer and having that be of the creative mediums in the world. That's been the one that I've had in some ways some of the least engagement with. I've been really pessimistic over the years in a way that I think is pretty unearned when it comes to the amazing creatives that are working in video games and stuff, of seeing the idea of what makes a game exciting and what makes a narrative exciting as two opposing goals. And I think that's been on the mind of game developers for decades now, and we've seen. I remember hearing so many criticisms of games from years ago of being like, "Oh, this game it's just like a movie, like it's too much like a movie," and of course, we have a long record of really unsuccessful video game adaptations that they just don't feel like they have the same heart that the game did, and a lot of the heart of the game came from you being able to control where you go and what you do, and of course, the movie is very much, in many ways, a passive experience. The plot of the movie is very much something that an audience doesn't have control over, and so. But I think that, like I said, like that pessimism is really unearned in a lot of ways, just because video games are such a young medium, and when we think about if we think about video games, of course there was like different ways in which we can define video game over the years, but if we think about like the early 1970s as being like really when they like came into their own, and we think about the like 1902, the first decade of the 1910s of the 1900s, as being like that's when films came into their own, and we think about like the 1960s and 50s were really like when films got to be a lot more experimentally narrative and started to rely a lot less on influence from theater and things like that. And when we think about the timeline of video games as a medium, and of course, like they can't be compared linearly. Video games are so driven by technological innovation in a way that films at that time weren't in the same way and stuff. So it's not a one-to-one. But if we were to draw it as a one-to-one, which I'm just going to do anyway, they're at like the 1940s. When we think about movies in the 1940s, there was still a lot of formulaicness. There was, I think at the time it was considered a really low to adapt a movie from a book. That was considered like really unwise or just a cash grab or things like that. And The Grapes of Wrath, I think, as a movie adaptation, kind of like broke that boundary down. And so I think just giving video games grace to develop further, and like, you know, so many amazing game developers and stuff over the years have like made such technological innovations, but there's such a deep horizon or a deeper ocean to explore with the capability of where gaming can move, especially with that it's so subject to the controller as an impact on the way the story develops and stuff. So all this to say is like, I think that we might just be just very early on in the dialogue between film and games as a medium, and I still struggle to have optimism for seeing the ways that video games can be engineered in a way that is a story that still feels true to the essence of the game, when it can still seem like the idea of a game and the idea of a narrative are two just completely different things. But in some ways it's like there's a real excitement to that because we trust in the spirit of filmmakers and game developers and people like Craig Mazin, who clearly have such a clear passion for both in a way that might even be equal, and have like a similar desire to push both mediums forward, that we can have faith in that those people, and if any of us end up in those scenarios, then us and the other filmmakers and game developers that we know, like, we will find a way, we will push it forward, and the creative just boundaries that will be broken by that are ones that we maybe haven't seen as clearly yet, but that we can trust are there, and just be really excited for what they'll be capable of.
Yeah, I think that's a really great argument, and I think it's actually, as much as you are like not wanting to compare it to film in their history, I think it's actually a really good comparison. Part of the reason why films were able to become more experimental in the 60s and 70s is because access to the tools and technology needed to actually make films became more accessible, and it allowed more people to make films and experiment and play around with things. And I think that we kind of just got to that point with video games. I feel like about, maybe 2016, 2017 we're just now getting to a point where more people have access to games and the tools to make them. And I think we're starting to see a lot more experimental kind of games in the like game marketplace. So I think you could be right that like maybe we just haven't seen what games could truly have to offer, especially with like technology constantly changing, and that being like a really like important factor in all of like how games develop and everything. But as like games relate to film, I think you're kind of also right of like the history of games so far until like, I don't know, maybe the mid 90s. I don't think there wasn't a lot of thought given to like, why are you doing this? Like, why is your character like, the princess was taken by Bowser, go save him, Mario. It's like, that's the whole story. And when you try and make, the Super Mario Brothers movie out of it, like, there's really not much to go off there. And now when they're making another Mario Brothers movie, it's like they probably called in, 10 or 12 people and were like, all right, we have all this Mario content that we've made over the last, 25 years. What's the best way that we can try and create a story in it? When they made the Mario Brothers movie in the 90s, I'm sure it was like, well, they're Italian plumbers and they need to save a princess. Like, I feel like they didn't they didn't try and go at it with as much thought to plotting and story as maybe they could have. But that's, that might be a disservice to the writers of the Mario
the
Brothers
1992 Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah. But, just kind of returning to my point that just like, I feel like movies need to be plot based, and like you said, their movies are kind of a passive experience and gaming is an active experience, and trying to find something where you can have a story that works as both is not an easy thing to do. And that's probably why most of the time when things get adapted from video games, they turn out bad. And this just happens to be the source material was suited to be something that could be turned into a passive experience and still work on an emotional level in terms of story.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good answer from both of you. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
I think I don't know. I think what you like how you mentioned kind of the difference between when movies kind of first originated and they're like you said, like 1902 or something, and then it only being to like the 40s, like when we started like or past then when we started experimenting with that, like that's a 40-year gap. And so like that really puts it into perspective of like, we're not that far into like video games, like the history of it at all. And I also like didn't think about like how Ryan put that, like we also just haven't even, access to like creating a game on your own. Like that's something I don't even think about because I just assume that is so hard. But, I'm sure people felt that way about film, and like we're so far past that and anyone can record anything at any time. So I do think there is just like a time gap of just having more access and having more exploration in that, and I don't know, a lot. And I'm kind of rambling, but I do think both those points are really interesting, and so I definitely am looking forward to how those things clash in the future.
Yeah. Do you guys have any other like closing thoughts, things you wanted to talk about The Last of Us before we wrap up?
I'm really satisfied.
Yeah. I think I'm good too.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys for coming on and talking about it. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you all next time.
Peace out.
See you.